So this week, the will to power. And as is so often the case, we can't understand what Nietzsche is saying about this without a quick retrospective glance at the German philosophy immediately preceding him. Specifically, we're going to have a little look at Kant and Schopenhauer. Now, it's a truism that we can't experience the world as it really is in itself. We can only experience the world from our perspective. That the view of the world for a human being is a world governed by gravity and vision. But if you imagine, say, a housefly, well, surface tension is important for animals of that scale in a way that it just isn't for humans. Or if you think about smells, think about the universe, or the panorama of interesting smells that a dog is aware of that completely passes us by, right? So our experience of the world is perspectival. Everybody knows that. That's obvious. Then there's a question about, well, can we overcome our perspective in the pursuit of knowledge? Can we, if we can't experience the world as the way it really is in itself, can we know what the world is like in itself, independently of our experience of it? Kant says no. Why not? Well, says Kant, because all of the categories that we use to make sense of the world, all of the categories that we use in our attempts to gain knowledge of the world, are all ultimately part of our perspective. So, for example, we think of the world and we experience the world as structured in space and time. And we think of events as being related as cause and effect, that events don't just happen. An event has a cause, we normally think, or has some kind of causal antecedents if we don't want to think that there's just one event that causes it. All of this, says Kant, is part of our perspective. And if we strip it away, if we try and think about what the world is like without being ordered in space and time, and without events being ordered causally, in causal chains, well, we're left with nothing, right? We're left with the formal idea of what the world is really like independently of our knowledge and experience of it, but we can't give that any content. Wittgenstein, speaking about this, observed that a nothing will do as well as a something of which nothing can be said. And that's sort of quite useful indicator here of quite how radical Kant's line is, that we can't know anything at all about the world as it is in itself. We can't even know whether it's made of stuff or made of things, because unity and continuity, so in other words, the basic categories of things and the basic category of stuff, are themselves categories that we impose on the world as part of our perspective. So all we know, says Kant, is that there must be a world in itself, because our experience is experience of something, but we can't say anything about it at all. But there's a slight wrinkle, which is that we ourselves are items in the world as it is in itself, and we're aware of ourselves as wills, right? So our subjective experience of willing gives us a kind of inkling into something about what the world is like in and of itself, but it doesn't go very far. What we experience is phenomena, but the noumenal world, the world as it is in itself, the world of noumena, is utterly closed to us, except for the small insight we gain through thinking about our own experience of willing. Okay, I'm not going to go into the reasons why Kant thinks this. All we really need to know is that this line of thinking sets the template for the philosophers that followed, the kind of classical age of German philosophy, Schelling and Fichte and the like. Well, one of those is Schopenhauer. And Schopenhauer's take on all this is to say, well, Kant was heading in the right direction, but we can know something about what the world is like in and of itself. And I, Schopenhauer, am going to tell you the underlying reality before it gets schematized by our perspective. So the reality that we experience, that we have in common with dogs and houseflies and everything else, is just pure will. Not will for anything, really. Just a kind of undifferentiated hunger, a kind of objectless craving. Because as soon as that craving finds an object, as soon as it becomes a craving by some particular creature for something specific, like food or sex or whatever, then it's been schematized, it's been shaped, it's been put into categories by some perspective. In itself, the world is just pure unsatisfaction, dissatisfaction, craving for something as yet unspecified. That's what reality is. And we experience that in a kind of schematized form, in a categorized form, in our own wants and desires. So whether it's a desire for something basic like food or sex, or whether it's a desire for something highly socially constructed like promotion, job satisfaction, right? I mean, cats and dogs, and for that matter, our Neolithic ancestors couldn't possibly crave job satisfaction, but we can. So our life is made up of these kinds of cravings. We're endlessly dissatisfied. Life, says Schopenhauer, alternates between dissatisfaction and boredom. We're dissatisfied because there's something that we want that we don't have, but when we get it, we quickly become bored, right? And what's the solution to this? Well, the short-term solution is to take refuge in aesthetic experience. So to kind of distract ourselves, really, with works of art, although the works of art mustn't be of a kind which remind us of our cravings. So paintings of food, all those still lives of fruit and other edibles, that's unhelpful. Presumably all those classical nudes aren't much help either. So art of a kind of refined sort that doesn't remind you of the things you're hungry for. And also music. And music is important in all this for two reasons. One, that it's non-representational. Music isn't pictures of something. I mean, yes, there are onomatopoeic moments in music, like using muted strings to suggest raindrops. But mostly, music doesn't represent anything. And this, Schopenhauer argues, means that music is the nearest thing to the sound of real reality. So, pictures, paintings are paintings of something, but the things they're paintings of are mere representations. They are reality once removed, whereas in music you can somehow hear the sound of the world as it really is in itself. It's the nearest thing we get to direct experience of the noumenal. But the longer term solution for Schopenhauer is asceticism. It's to damp down your desires. It's to train yourself to feel your desires less keenly. And the route for that is the usual ascetic disciplines of simple diet, regular life, abstinence from these various kinds of things. Now, as we will see, Nietzsche regards this as the wrong answer, because if you go the ascetic route, if you try and damp down your desires, what you're ultimately recommending is death. And his reason for thinking that comes out of his account of what life is all about.